Anybody who gets struck down with an illness at a young age, it can be quite difficult. I wasn't too bad. I've been through college, so I had developed to a large degree, but especially younger kids, it can be very difficult. You're brought up sick, so you have a sick attitude and a sick outlook on life. You see it through the eyes of someone who's sick. But my ideas on this subject is that you should always have a healthy outlook and just see your illness as something that just happens to happen. Like, I see myself as being perfectly healthy. I just happen to have to go to the hospital 3 days a week. My name is Darren Cawley. I'm 29 for another 2 months. I live in a little village, Ahagaur, about 4 or 5 miles outside Westport. I have a huge selection of hobbies, really. I love sport. I have played all sorts of sport: boxing, Gaelic, rugby, soccer, handball and racquetball. And with this in mind, I went to college to study sports in England. After 2 years in college, I started getting blurred vision. And that, coupled with headaches, I went to see a doctor. I thought something might be wrong. I might need glasses. I went into the emergency room and there was maybe 20 people waiting. But as soon as I handed in the letter, I got taken in immediately. So that's when alarm started ringing in my head. They took my blood pressure and they told me I was in high risk of having a stroke. So that's how it all kicked off. About 2 days after that, I was told I had kidney failure. Obviously I was quite upset, but totally uncertain, did no idea what that meant. Whether that meant I've got a few weeks to live or they give me some medication, I'd be back to normal, everything would be fine. Dialysis is essentially the artificial work of the kidney is done through dialysis. What they do is your blood comes out, goes into a machine where it's filtered and cleaned and is passed back in again. I finished my final year in college while on dialysis and I went on the transplant list immediately on coming home. And after 6 months on the transplant list, which is quite a short time, about 7 o'clock in the morning, I got a telephone call. Would you mind coming to Dublin immediately? We may have a transplant for you, I may have a new kidney. They did all the preliminary tests, blood type, tissue type, antigens, just to make sure it was a perfect match, and it was as close as they could get. After the transplant, I got involved with the Irish Kidney Association. One of the things they were going to do at the time was to send a team to the World Transplant Games, which were happening in Kobe, Japan. Because I was so huge into sport, I said definitely I'd love to be involved in this. I got my transplant in January, but the games were on that summer, so there wasn't much chance. I thought that I'd recover in time and train and be able to compete at a high standard. But as it worked out, the transplant was a success, and after 3 or 4 months I felt fantastic, so I started training with athletics in mind to represent Ireland at these transplant games. What resulted was probably the best time at the time of my life. I didn't realise I would be ever able to participate in sport, never mind represent your country. And the team, the friends we met were just absolutely fantastic. And it was really a bonus that I won 2 medals at the games. They were both in athletics, the 200 and the 400. I came third from both events. One of the other highlights of the last few years was I won a Mayo Person of the Year award. So I was over the moon with that. It was an honour, not just for myself, but for my whole family and for anyone who had kidney failure, and that even if you do get sick or you're struck with adversity, you can come back and maintain a normal life. And it's nice to get rewarded for that. Transplants in general usually last between 10 and 15 years. Now you could get up to 20, but the most dangerous time is the first 6 months. For me, that breezed by. I had no trouble at all. But after a year and a half, I was told the function of the kidney was starting to decline and that I had a virus. They finally figured out it was a viral infection. It just attacked the kidney. Now, anybody could get this virus. You might catch a cold, that's all. But with my body, I was on a huge amount of immunosuppressants, which lowered my immunity to all these smaller viruses that usually people can overcome quite easily. So I was told I was going to lose the kidney, which came as a great shock because I assumed being so healthy and fit I'd have it for maybe 20 years. So I was back on dialysis, which was a lot harder this time because I knew what it was all about, and it just took longer to get used to it compared to the 2 years I had being perfectly healthy, as close to perfectly healthy as you can. Well, my future plans are, number one will always have to be to get a transplant. I've been on the waiting list now maybe 3-4 years compared to 6 months the first time I had a transplant. So initially I thought maybe after 6 months, a year, I'd get another transplant. But it's not looking like that. So initially I didn't make any plans, thinking any day now I'll get a transplant, everything will be back to normal then. But after 2 years, still no sign of a transplant. So what I use the dialysis time for now is to kind of try and read more books on business or educate myself further, so that when I do get a transplant I can try and make money, and because I know I'm always going to have an illness, so it's time to start preparing for the future and having a better outlook financially, to try and make enough money so that whenever anything does go wrong or any problems I may have, I'll be looked after. So the best way to do that is try and educate yourself as much as possible. So the biggest difference in my life since I got the transplant is my outlook. I was very quiet, shy away from most things when I was younger, But it was only after getting sick that I realised that life is too short. I started reading a great deal. On dialysis, you could be there for 4 hours, 3 days a week. You are there for 4 hours, 3 days a week. So I started reading books, and more motivational books, and I guess people call them self-help books, because they were incredibly helpful to me. It changed my outlook to try and experience things that I would usually have shied away from, to travel as much as possible, even with dialysis. It lessens the fear you have of the small things. You don't sweat the small stuff, that kind of idea.